It's episode 142 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. I hope you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving and are spending some quality time with your families, but thank you for tuning into the show on this Friday after Thanksgiving. Go to hankgarner.com where you can find all of the archives of the show. There you can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, YouTube. Anywhere that you listen to the show, you can subscribe and help support the show in that way. It really does help if you'll go and click the subscribe button, and while you're there, please leave a comment on the show. In the show notes of today's show, you can find out about all of our sponsors. I hope you will visit them and let them know how much you appreciate them sponsoring the show. ThirdScribe.com has a brand new look and feel. Rob and the guys over there are really doing something tremendous in really building a platform that connects readers and authors in a way that a lot of places have tried but not done very well. I really like the attention to detail that they're showing there at ThirdScribe, and I hope you'll go visit them at ThirdScribe.com and check it out. If you're a writer, they can give you everything that you need to launch your platform. If you're a reader, they can help you connect with the writers that you love. Go visit them at ThirdScribe.com. Also in the show notes today, click on my Patreon link and go find out how you can support the podcast and my writing and everything that I do. Patreon.com/Hank Garner. There's a link in the show notes as well.
Earth defeated the aliens once. Now they're back. After the devastating attack on Earth, the swarm fell back to regroup. Now, sooner than expected, they've returned to finish what they started, enslaving the human race. Samantha Avery, newly promoted captain of Avenger, has her hands full. A paid assassin seeking her death, a renegade officer working for the Swarm, and an enemy fleet bent on the destruction of the vital Wellington shipyards. As the Swarm launches a devastating attack against Britannia sector, Avery finds she must seek victory on multiple fronts. But Avery is a patriot for humanity. She's a dam standing tall against the alien flood. She is an Avenger.
Legacy Fleet Avenger, The First Swarm War Book 2 by Chris Porteau is now available on Amazon.com. From the best-selling world of Nick Webb's Legacy Fleet comes the follow-up to David Brunn's Invincible, Legacy Fleet Avenger, available now on Amazon.com. Hey everybody, I've got a guest with me for this short segment. Crystal Pico Watanabe is on with me to talk about Pico's House. And Crystal, thank you for coming on and doing this with me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Tell everybody a little bit about you and how you came to editing.
Well, I started off, I just so happened, several years ago, I came across Hugh Howey's Wool. And, I emailed him and he's really good about email, right? So he offered to let me be a beta reader for him. And so I did it for second shift. And he was really impressed with my feedback. So he actually encouraged me to become an editor. And he said that he could, forward people on to me because he said authors were always asking him for editor recommendations. And so, I that's eventually how I got into editing. So
Nice. So you kind of got in it at trial by fire.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects that you've been involved with other than your one-on-one author editing? You've also been involved in some big anthologies and things like that. Tell us about some of those.
Yeah, one of the big jobs that Hugh actually got for me was he recommended me to Samuel Peralta, and Sam hired me to do a lot of his Future Chronicles anthologies. So I've done 5, I think, so far, maybe 6. I'd have to go back and check. I've done a lot of them, so I've gotten a lot of short story experience through the Future Chronicles. But those have been really fun, and it's a really really good learning experience for me because I get to work with so many different authors, right? So
right. How different is it editing a collection of short stories as opposed to editing a novel?
I mean, it's difficult because I have to juggle so many different people and so many different projects at the same time. So it definitely requires a different mindset from like just dealing with one person and one novel and one story arc. But it's still fun. I mean, I kind of like having a little chaos mixed in occasionally, you know.
And you're available to edit standalone short stories or novels or anything in between, is that right?
Yeah. I do short stories, novellas, full-length novels. I have most of my experience in science fiction and fantasy and middle grade fiction, but I'm open to, other things. Like I also have clients that do crime and mystery thrillers and horror and things like that. So yeah, I'm open to a lot of different things.
Gotcha. Who do you think is your prime candidate? That someone that you think would be a really good fit for you and your services?
The sample edit that I do complimentary sample edits.
Okay.
And sample edits are actually a way for both of us to get to know each other, so that's why I like to do them. It gives the client a way to look at my editing style and see if, we see eye to eye on stories and comments and things like that. And for me, it's a good gauge for whether I like the story, whether I like the writing style, whether it also gives me a good idea of how much work is going to be needed, so it lets me quote accurately. So,
Gotcha. If an author is not really familiar with how the editor-author relationship works, what can an author expect if they contact you and you both feel like you're a good fit for each other? Kind of break down what the process is like. I think that's one of the most intimidating things. For a new author, I can speak from experience, is as an author, you pour your heart and soul into a story, and then you give it to someone kind of sheepishly, and you say, "Please tear this apart for me, and tell me all the ways that it's wrong." But what can people expect, and kind of how does that relationship work back and forth?
It depends on the author because some people really want brutal, honest feedback. Some people want people to be nicer, and so it all depends. I mean, that's why I know that I'm not the right editor for every author out there. And like I said, that's why I really like to do the sample edit, because I feel like you as the author have to be comfortable with what the editor is doing with your work, because ultimately it is your work. You always have to find an editor that you feel respects that it's your story in the end.
What kind of time frame does an author look for when they send you a book? How long does the back and forth between you and the author usually take?
I mean, it depends on the length of the project, and also every editor is different. So I can't speak for all editors. I mean, for me, a novel will take maybe about 2 weeks. Anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the length. Sometimes it takes longer than that. And then when you get it back from the editor, then you have to go through the changes, which is thousands of changes, right? So that can take a while too. So I mean, if you want to publish next month, that's probably not very realistic to go looking for an editor like right now. I would look 2 to 3 months or more at least ahead of time for an editor. So
great. And your website is pikkoshouse.com. That's pikkoshouse.com. Authors, if you're looking for an editor, Crystal is one of the very best. Go look through her portfolio, look at some of the books that she's been involved with, read some of the testimonials that authors have posted there. You will not be disappointed, and I can speak to this, that the editor-author relationship is something very special, and when you find someone that you really click with, there's nothing better for your fiction than connecting with the editor that best suits you. And Crystal is one of the best out there. I highly recommend you go to pikkoshouse.com, contact Crystal, and get started. Where is that the best way to contact you, Crystal?
Yeah, I have a contact form on my website, or you can email me as well. So, yep.
Great. And if you tell Crystal that you heard about it on Author Stories, she'll give you a discount. You can get a $75 discount on manuscripts over 60,000 words or $25 on short stories. So please go by and check out her website. Give her a shout and let her know you heard about it on Author Stories. Thanks for joining me, Crystal.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, my guest is Charlie Holmberg, and I first discovered Charlie back earlier this year through her book, The Paper Magician. And it's one of those books that has a really intriguing cover, and which I really love, and one of those covers that when you first glance at it, you think it's one thing, and then when you look at it a little closer, you realize there's something else going on, and then you read the description and you go, oh, this is something entirely altogether different, and I think I'm going to love it. And I did. And thanks to my Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, Charlie was another author that I discovered this year, and I'm super happy I did. So, Charlie, we tried to connect earlier in the year, and this was the first availability that we had to get together, and I'm really, really happy to have you on the show. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the nice words.
Oh, you're welcome. I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
My first memory was 13 years old, and mine's a little quirky because it wasn't a book that inspired me. It was actually a Japanese anime.
Okay.
But there was a show called Escaflowne that came on the Fox Kids that my sister got into, and she made me watch it. And it was so different from all the American cartoons I was watching at the time, and I just fell in love with the story and all the characters, and I just thought, I want to make a story that's as good as this one. And so since I'm not an animator, I started turning to writing, and that's how I got on the road.
Awesome. So what were those first stories that you started telling yourself? What direction did they take?
They're awful.
as everybody's are.
Yeah. They're all they're fantasy stories. I think I first started writing portal fantasies. Girl who is secretly me, but I'm pretending like it's not, goes into a mysterious world and has magic powers. A lot of them were like that. I didn't actually finish a book until I was 19, though, so there's scraps and pieces in a floppy disk that is long burned.
Right. Did you have any family members that recognized something in you that maybe they thought, oh, Charlie's got a gift here, or there's something? Do you think anyone else recognized that?
No, no, none of them did. Even now, I mean, it's like, oh, I'm writing books, and it's like, oh, that's great, but I don't know. The more I write, I think the more they're like figuring it out. But when I started getting a little bit more serious about it in my 20s, I did have a sister who thought I was going to go somewhere, but mostly they just kind of ignored me. Love you, Mom.
Well, that happens a lot. There's sometimes it's a lot easier to get recognition from complete strangers, or I don't know what it is, but that happens a lot to people. Like our family are the last ones who kind of realize that something's going on there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, having a career like this one where you're making money writing fantasy novels, that's so far-fetched.
Right.
And, people are like, oh, I want to be an actress or something, and nobody believes you're actually going to do it.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of that, too.
Sure. Is fantasy something that always appealed to you?
Oh, yeah. Fantasy is way more exciting than the real world. So everything I write is fantastical in one way or another.
Yeah. The portal fantasy stuff that excited you when you were young, like what sort of worlds did you have your characters go to?
Oh, gosh. Just the worlds that would now, today, if I wrote about them, they'd be like epic fantasy worlds, like totally different, with weird creatures and people with wings or magic powers or unicorns or whatever I was into at the time. It would just be super different. And that's just where my imagination would go.
You said that you finished a book at 19. What was that book about?
Yeah, that was called The Oracle Seals, and I got the idea from playing Tales of Symphonia with my sister. It was way too long, and it reads like a really bad Japanese RPG. But it was about this world that had an oracle, and the oracle would know the answers to everything, anything that was going to happen. And so countries were always fighting over the oracle, and so these people found the oracle and sealed her away so nobody could use her to start these wars anymore. But then you have this super high-tech country that happens to live in a moving city in the ocean who was coming to take over the continent, so they had to go awaken the oracle to defeat them. But to awaken the oracle, like, she has a personality and a life now, and so if they awaken her, that they're going to take all of that away. So that was that story.
Yeah. What happened to that story? Did you ever do anything with it?
Oh, no. I finished it. It was 169,000 words long. I finished it, and I never looked at it again.
Whoa, that's... I've talked to so many people on this show in 140 something episodes, and you would not believe the number of authors who began with some sort of an epic fantasy that's well over 100,000 words, and there's just something, I don't know what it is, but there's something. Like so many of us think that that's the first thing we're going to tackle, and a lot of people finish them, and a lot of people never look at them again and put it in a drawer and walk away.
Yeah, well, what's funny is the first 5 books I wrote were all epic fantasies, and nothing ever happened with them. It wasn't until I stopped writing epic fantasy that I started selling books.
Really?
So...
Well,
yeah, lesson learned.
First off, what do you think it is about epic fantasy that we as readers love so much?
I don't know, because it's like I said, the reason I like fantasy is because it's so different from real life. It's like real life stuff I can go and do, but fantasy stuff doesn't exist. And so if I want to experience that, I have to go to a story to do it. And epic fantasy just has so much of it, where everything is fantastical, and it's so different and so much fun to enjoy because it really is a whole new world. And so I think that's what the big draw is. And it's so complicated, and so many characters there are to like, and great fan fiction appeal,
Right.
But I think that's the initial draw. When I started writing, I wanted to be the female Brandon Sanderson. So that's why I was always reading his epic fantasies. I wanted to write epic fantasies like his too.
Oh man, he's such an interesting character. I think there's only one of him in the universe that will ever be. He's an awesome guy, but has an ability that I think it's superhuman. I think he's not human. I think that's what it comes down to. So you said that. So obviously you were writing books. This was something that you believed that you were going to make a go at. Like you finished that first book, and you wrote another, and then another, and another. Did you ever doubt yourself that you were going to be a published author?
No, I didn't, because I'm a big believer in the American dream. And it's like, well, if I just work hard enough and if I just keep going, then I'll get there. And I knew that I was getting better with every book. And so I just knew if I just kept pushing myself and kept submitting and kept writing, that eventually I would get there. I didn't know when, but I knew I would get there.
Yeah. And all along you were honing your craft and paying your dues and all of those things that come along with just getting in the trenches and just doing it.
Oh yeah, like I was taking creative writing classes, I was going to conferences, I was actually in Brandon Sanderson's creative writing class, and I think I damaged part of his psyche permanently because I'm not the best student. But I was doing all of it. I was reading the craft books and everything, trying to get better.
Oh, that's awesome. You said that you shifted gears after your 5th book and left epic fantasy, and that's when you got published. What was the thing that you did after that?
I wrote young adult, and I wrote Followed by Frost. That was the sixth one, even though it was like my second published book. And it's still high fantasy. It was still otherworld, but it was a young adult book. It was a lot smaller in scope, and it was just a lot easier to follow, and it had clearer goals and just more specific, like, this is what we're trying to achieve, I think. And so I changed the audience, and I changed my genre just a little bit, and it turned out a lot better that way.
Gotcha. And so that was the next book you wrote, but not the first book you sold. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what was the first book that you sold?
The first book I sold was The Paper Magician, and that was the ninth one I wrote.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me the story first about how The Paper Magician came about. Where did the idea come from, and what was your path to getting that out to the world?
Okay, so Paper Magician, I'd always had this idea of having magical origami, which honestly I now know is not unique. I know there's other places that have that, but I always thought it would be cool to have origami that was alive. And I had that idea in my head probably for a year or two, and I had this idea of a character who ended up being Emery Thane, who's the male in the book. And I thought, oh, he would be a cool side character in a book. And I just kind of held on to that for a really long time until I finally thought, okay, well, what if he was the main character? And then I didn't want the magic to just be paper. I wanted it to be a bigger magic system. So I started thinking, okay, well, what is paper? What can I connect with paper? And eventually I thought, paper is man-made. What else is man-made? What if we use those things to cast spells? And that's how the magic system came about. And then I created Feeny, my protagonist, to kind of propel the story, even though the story is really about Emery Thane.
Gotcha. I'm really fascinated by magic systems, and especially magic systems that have a logical background, for lack of a better word, even though we're talking about magic, but that the author really has thought out how this works and why this works, and approaches it almost in a scientific way.
Yeah.
What do you? You told a little bit about how you developed the magic system there, but do you sit down and just start thinking through all the implications of how this would work, and then what the fallout from that would be, and then how people would use it? Like, what's the process for you for building a magic system?
More or less that. I mean, I like starting with, okay, what's the ability? Like, what can people do with this? And then, expanding it out. I like the scientific idea of magic as well. And so, like, what would the rules be? What are the limitations of this magic? What makes it interesting? And then how would this affect society? Like, how would this magic be in society? Is it secretive? Is it public? How would it change, history, or how would it change how society functions? And what are the downsides? Like, what would magic users be like? In the case of Paper Magician, I thought, well, how about we just have anybody can be a magic user? Why don't we just make it special? And so magic is really commonplace, and anybody who wants to put the work in can be a magician, just like anyone can be a doctor.
A bit of that old American dream spirit leaking into the fantasy.
Yes.
I like that, because a lot of fantasy is based around this idea that someone is special, and a lot of times they've been hidden away. It's a little peasant boy who really is the chosen one, but they've been, tucked away in this little hamlet, and one day they're going to realize who they are, or there's a prophecy or something like that. But I like the idea that magic is something attainable, and that if you put in the work, that anybody could pull it off. I'm kind of assuming that has resonated with readers more than me. Do you get any feedback about that?
I've gotten a few comments about it, that people like that idea of it. It's like, oh, what magician would I be? Because if you can choose, so you could do whatever you want instead of just hoping you have the right genetic code, or
right.
You're the chosen one. Like, you can choose that.
That's cool. So, how did who picked up the book, and when you finished the book, did you just start querying it and finally got an agent that was interested? Kind of what was that like for you?
Yeah. I finished the book. I wrote the rough draft in a month, which is the fastest I've ever written a book. And
how long?
Edition was just one where I thought in a month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was excited, and I was currently unemployed. So, but that was the book where I thought, I feel like this could be published. Like, I feel really good about this book. And so, querying it, and early on, I queried my now agent, Marlene Stringer, and she asked me for a full the same day I queried her. And then a week later, we had the call, and she wanted to represent me. And so we built that partnership, and she shopped it to a few publishers, and 47 North from Amazon bit. And they bought the first 2 books and released them the following year.
Wow, that's amazing. So much about that I want to ask you. You wrote the book in a month. There's this idea that that books take a long time and take a lot of sweat and tears, and that there's many late nights over a year or two where the book gets worked out and all this stuff, and then you come across there are these books that just have to come out, and you talk to authors and they're like, well, the book was just kind of dictating itself as it came out. Was that this very different from your typical creative process, or are you typically a fast writer, or was this just something special?
I do tend to write a little bit fast, especially now. But before I wrote Paper Magician, I'd actually just read the book Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is a screenwriting.
Right.
But it's really great for plotting, and he has a whole different way of plotting. And so I tried that for the first time, and I plotted Paper Magician that way. That really helped with the spark and helped me get, a plot that would be interesting, not, just to potential readers, but to me. And so I did that, and then I started drafting, and I spit the book out, and it is a short book. The first draft was only 56,000 words long.
Gotcha.
I just spit it out, and then I did my revisions to the world.
That's awesome. So you are a plotter by nature?
Oh, big time. I'm a big time outliner, A-type personality.
Gotcha.
I have to know what's going on.
Gotcha. The month that it took you to write that book, did that include the plotting, or was that after you kind of had an idea what the book was?
No, the month was just the drafting. So I had done the plotting probably the month before.
Gotcha. How long does that plotting process take you?
It depends. It depends on the book. It depends on how many ideas I have. Because sometimes I think, well, I want to do this, but I don't know how, and so I have to sit on it a lot longer. Paper Magician, some of the ideas I had for that book were kind of brewing in the back of my mind for a while. And so, that's kind of cheater plotting. So there have been some books that, I take a few months to plot, but then there is the next book I have coming out, actually, I had to plot in a week because I told the idea to my agent, who then told the idea to my editor, who was interested, even though I didn't have a story yet. So that one I had to do very quickly. But it probably takes me a month or two to figure out my stories.
Gotcha. I like what you said about, I think you called it cheater plotting, but, I do that a lot, that I'll have an idea for something and I'll just kind of walk around with the idea and just kind of think through different possibilities, or I'll get the idea for a character that intrigues me, and for lack of a better term, I'd kind of get to know the character, and that really works well for me. And then when I, sit down to the computer to actually start writing, things are already brewing and percolating. And, I think that's a big benefit to to not just sit down immediately with the pen and start trying to, write a full outline, but to take some time to kind of get a feel for the plot or the character or the setting or whatever it is that intrigues you about the book to begin with.
Yeah, it's like slow cooker story making.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. Yeah, you just put all the ingredients in, put the lid on it, and let it let it all get happy for a while. That's great. So 47 North bought the first two books in the Paper Magician series, but you said that you had Followed by Frost already finished. How did you bring that book out?
Let's see. I think we had printed the first two books, and then The Master Magician was in the works. And then I told my agent about Followed by Frost, and she pushed that one at my editor and got him to buy it. I think she bullied him a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, so he bought it, and it came out in the same year that The Master Magician came out in. But I think that's the only book in my backlog that I would ever want published. All the other ones are just going to sit in the dumpster fire of my imagination.
The Followed by Frost, what is that book about? Because it's got this really intriguing cover.
Oh, well, thank you. I picked the desert layout. But it's a book about a girl who is she's really beautiful and very talented, but she's incredibly selfish. And she turns down the marriage proposal for a guy who turns out to be a wizard, and he curses her to be as cold as her heart. And so she just turns like ice cold, and a snowstorm starts following her wherever she goes, and it starts killing the crops in her. They're getting sick, and so they cast her out, and she basically just has to wander on her own for a really long time with death as a companion, because she's neither living nor dead. And so she draws the attention of Death himself, and it's kind of the story of her changing and her getting this possibility to redeem herself by using her curse for good.
Oh wow, that's it's a bit of a twist on some of the fairy tale stories that we've kind of been in our consciousness for a while, and but I like the twist that you put on it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people tell me that, it's a retelling of The Ice Queen, or it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I did not do that on purpose, but I'll take it. But yeah, I like that kind of fairy tale aspect of it.
What's different for you in writing a book like that and writing like one of the Paper Magician books? Like how is your process different?
Actually, I just that's a hard question to answer. I just write whatever story pops up in my head that's interesting for me. So sometimes that can jar readers, because I know that people who like my Paper Magician series will then read Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet and be like, whoa, this is not the Paper Magician series. I don't like this book. But I just, there's all kinds of different stories going on in my head, and I just write the ones that I like the most. So Followed by Frost happened to be the one that I liked at that time. I think I wrote that one 2 or 3 years before Paper Magician came out. So
wow.
Just however I feel at the time.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, the Paper Magician has, north of 3,600 reviews on Amazon. That's a sizable audience for a debut book. Does that surprise you at all that people have loved that book like they have?
Oh yeah, I was super surprised. So I was really lucky in that Paper Magician was selected to be a Kindle First book for the month before it was released. So anybody who was an Amazon Prime member could just download the book for free. And I was so surprised, because I'm a debut novelist and nobody's ever heard of me, but we had over 100,000 downloads of that book in a month. And I was just floored by it. And because so many people got it, I got a lot of reviews to start off, which I think really helps with the marketing of the book. And even now, I'm like, why do you guys even like this? It's not even historically accurate. But yeah, I mean, it's still, when I really stop and think about it, it's still just kind of weird to me. that so many people that I don't even know read my book, you know? Not that I'm complaining. I'm very happy about it.
Right.
But it was definitely a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, for sure. You said that it's not historically accurate, and I think we failed to mention earlier that this is a kind of a period piece. What time period does this take place in? And what's the general setting?
It's the very beginning of the Edwardian period in England, because I was watching Downton Abbey when I was writing it. That's why that happened.
As we all were at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. But originally it was otherworld fantasy, just based off of England. And then after we sold it, my editor said, "Well, let's just make it England." And so we did, with like the places and stuff, but the tone is still very American. And so, and that doesn't settle well with everybody, but that's just how it was written.
Did that intimidate you at all, anchoring that in a real place, in a real time?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, if I actually had gone through and made the prose more British, that would have been really intimidating, because, I mean, I'm not British, and I that would have been a lot to chew. Yeah. But for the time being, we just changed the places and just made sure. I think at one point we mentioned radios, and radios didn't exist, so we just took those out, just making it at least somewhat historically accurate, even if the language isn't.
Is that series finished now, or will there be more books in the Paper Magician series?
I can answer that question depending on when this airs.
In about 2 weeks from now.
I can't.
Okay.
I don't. Maybe. That's what we'll say. Is maybe. Stay tuned, everyone.
We'll settle for a maybe, and we'll keep watching your Amazon page for sure.
Okay.
That's awesome. So you wrote 3 books in the series so far, we'll say. When you first wrote Paper Magician, did you see that this series could be continued, or was it just kind of a one-off, and then you had to kind of figure out how to expand the story?
Okay, so I am a standalone writer. I prefer writing single books.
Gotcha.
But whenever I write a single book, I always think, well, if it were to keep going, what would happen? And so after I wrote The Paper Magician, I thought that, and I had a ton of ideas. I thought, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And so I thought I could totally write at least. And so when I shopped it around, I said it was a standalone with sequel potential. And so from that, I was able to get the other 2 books. But that's the only series I've ever written. Everything else I write is standalone, like singularly contained.
Do you feel like in the publishing climate now that acquisitions editors or agents or whomever are more prone to pick up a book that has series potential?
Oh, yeah. Series potential. If you say this is the first book of a 7-book series, they don't like that. If it's a standalone, they don't like that as much. If you say standalone with series potential, way more likely to pick up the book, because that means like they can sell it whether or not they have a series. You can make a lot of money off of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that we're seeing a little turn of the tide with some readers, because there's some big series that have been marketed as a series of X number of books, and some of those authors have not been exactly speedy about making it through the series. Not calling out anyone in particular.
George Martin. What?
And some readers are kind of hesitant to begin a 7-book series with only 1 or 2 books out, that may take 20 years to finish. So I like that idea. I think that's a very practical thing that we as writers can keep in mind as we are publishing, is that to make sure your book can stand on its own. But leave it open to expand, and that way we we maintain reader expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your latest book is called Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet. Tell us about that one.
So Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet is another world fantasy about a woman who can influence people through her baked goods. So if she's making a cake and she's thinking thoughts about, happiness, then whoever eats her cakes will be able to feel that happiness. And so she has this weird powers and she doesn't know why she has it. She doesn't have any memories of her life from the past 4 years, but nothing before that. And basically about who has these abilities, but it's far grander than she could have ever expected. She ends up meeting this ethereal ghost man who knows who she is but can't tell her for various reasons. And then she meets this guy who is based off of Johnny Depp's Mad Hatter character, who's kind of crazy, who she suspects knows who she is, but who also won't tell her. And so she's got to kind of figure it out for herself.
Interesting. That's what has the reception been to that book? You said that some readers that love The Paper Magician were kind of taken a little aback by it, but I love the premise of that story. Are readers finding that book and giving you good feedback on it?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's gotten good. Oh my gosh, my brain just went blank. Reception, that's the word I want. It's gotten good reception, but there are definitely those who are going to it because they like the Paper Magician series, and it is different. It's an adult book. It's not young adult. It's a lot darker than the Paper Magician series. The Paper Magician series is more whimsical, and this one's just a lot darker and deals with a lot more serious issues. So people especially, I'm a clean writer, but people who are really squeaky clean readers don't like this book as much.
Gotcha. What is the difference for you in writing a book that's more targeted to adults and as opposed to ones that are YA? What is do you consciously set out to do that, or does the tone of the book just kind of reveal itself in the writing?
Usually do nowadays is I write right on the line in the new adult section and then if we sell it, I can let my publisher decide which side of the fence they want to be on. But generally speaking, when I write a book, I know this is going to be more YA or this is going to be more adult, because I know what the story's going to be and I know what the characters are going to be like. But I try to write kind of on the fence, so I could kind of swing either way.
For people that may not be really familiar, when you say that you write right on the fence there, what is it that makes a book YA or makes it adult? Is it just the age of the characters? Is it content? Like where will you steer a story to make it one or the other?
All of the above. Character age is a really big part of it. It's not always a big part of it, though. We have Ender's Game where the main character is 6 years old, but that's not a book for kids. But the character's age does say a lot. The content, like what's being dealt with, if you're dealing with issues of fitting in with your social circles, for example, that's a lot more YA than it is going to be adult. Whereas if you're dealing with issues of infertility, teenagers don't care about that. So that's obviously going to be a more adult book. Also content, if you want to write a bunch of F-bombs and sex scenes and stuff, actually you can do that in YA too. But depending on how intense you are, that might be better for an adult audience than the young adult audience.
Gotcha. Is there going to, will you expand the Magic Bitter, Magic Sweet story, or is that book fully standalone?
That book's closed. Yeah, that one's
gotcha. You also are involved, I believe, with a project called Deep Magic Magazine. We had Jeff Wheeler on the show back in the spring, and the magazine was just about to launch at that time. Tell us a little bit about how that's going, and and kind of what you guys are doing with that.
Oh, it's going really well so far, and it's been really fun to be on the board for it. So it's a bi-monthly online magazine for science fiction and fantasy. We have short stories from both published and unpublished authors. We have craft articles, and we usually have some interviews. I got to interview both my agent and Brandon Sanderson for different issues.
Nice.
And it's really fun. We usually have a novel excerpt, too. The one for December is actually one of Jeff's books. It's his latest book. So, I mean, that's fun. It's also like free reading for me. It's like, oh, look, I don't have to pay for these. I'll just read through the slush pile. But, you know, it's been really fun. You know, the board's really fun to be with, and it's really great to just see how all the creativity, I'll be able to be, you know, part of something that just, I don't know, I just love it. I just love science fiction, I love fantasy, and I like being able to have my hands in that too. And we emphasize clean stories as well, so I know I don't have to, you know, pray to Jesus after I'm reading a slush story, which is always nice.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Charlie Holmberg, thank you for taking time to come on the show. I'm a big fan of your writing. And where can people find you on the internet if they want to find out more about you, if they want to find out more about your books? Where can they follow you and connect with you?
My website is charlienholmberg.com, and I am on Twitter and I'm on Instagram as CN Holmberg, if anyone wants to look me up. I also have a Facebook page, Charlie and Holmberg, if they want to come hang out with me there. So those are my links.
Awesome. Do you have anything on the schedule, a new book coming out anytime soon?
I do have a new book that's coming out next year. We don't have a release date quite yet, but we finally have a title, and it's called The Fifth Doll. And that one will be more, I mean, it's a fence sitter, but it's more on the adult side, and it is a story that revolves around magic with Russian Matryoshka dolls, the nesting dolls that they have.
Oh, nice.
So hopefully the first half of next year, but we'll see. And then there might be another book released next year that I can't talk about, so we'll see.
Gotcha. Charlie, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking time to come on the show.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Author Stories. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Please go visit hankgarner.com for all of the archives. If you'll stay tuned just a moment, I've got a special clip for you from Legacy Fleet Avenger by Chris Porto. I think you're really going to like it. Also, don't forget to go to patreon.com/Hank Garner. If you've gotten some benefit from the Author Stories podcast or you enjoy my writing, please go sign up. It really would help. Thank you so much.
Bridge, ISS Intrepid. Admiral Melinda Kilgore watched as their fighter wings echeloned, one behind the other, into the enemy's lines. It felt a bit to her like watching bugs splatter on a windshield, but many were getting through to the line of carriers behind the protective cloud of swarm fighters. The fighter wing from Independence had already passed the storm of swarm resistance and was threatening the first capital ship. The enemy pilots were adapting to circumstance and circling back on the sixes of the birds that slipped past. But if they could disrupt the greater enemy numbers long enough, Avenger herself, followed by Intrepid's massive firepower, could divide the oncoming swarm battle line. It was an old strategy. Break a stronger enemy into weaker parts and defeat each one in turn, rather than face superior numbers as a cohesive force. It was also a long shot, but it was humanity's only chance at victory here. Who are you kidding, Melinda? She thought. There's no victory here. Only death delayed. The swarm force was just too overwhelming. Admiral, Spartan reports its task force ready to engage enemy fighters, said her comms officer. Execute, Lieutenant. Behind her, Kilgore heard the order relayed to the destroyer's captain. Spartan and her escorts had one task: plunge headlong into the cloud of swarm fighters and provide close fire support to their own fighter wings. Useless against the carriers, the destroyer's shields would offer some protection against attack by the enemy fighters. Then the bigger ships, led by Avenger, would take on the line of carriers. Everything according to plan, said Captain Vickers, his eyes like hers glued to the view screen. And it's a good plan, ma'am. So far, replied Kilgore, so far. But it all hinged on the blocker following up the destroyers and charging through that weakened enemy line. It all hinged on Avenger.
Avenger by Chris Porteau, available now at Amazon.com.